And unless, of course, if there becomes an all-out war between Hezbollah and Israel in the north of Israel, as well as the Gaza escapade. If that happens, all bets are off. Turkey will have to maybe do more than rhetoric. So far, though, Erdogan is really good at rhetoric when he talks about entering Karabakh or entering Libya. Well, that was not much. He supported the current unstable government of Libya. Karabakh, it's not quite clear what he did, but if he's suggesting he's going to send troops into Israel, not yet. I would not take it seriously.
Is he something that the Israelis should be worried about if they contemplate a major conflagration against Hezbollah, or is he the last of their worries?
He's not the last. There are economic ties. If I recall correctly, there's the provision of oil and other fuels, and there's an active trade between Turkey and Israel. So Israel's economy is falling apart anyway. This would be part of their calculation. They wouldn't want this, but God knows what Netanyahu, now that he's been authorized by the Israeli cabinet to do his own retaliation, so to speak, against that firing against the Druze up there on the Golan. Now that he's been authorized to do that, together with Army Chief Gallant, God knows what's going to happen, and that's of course the big question right now.
Israel and Gaza, and Israel and Hezbollah. Let's start with Gaza. I understand that the latest terror to strike the Palestinian people is polio, and that some of the right-wing members of President or Prime Minister Netanyahu's cabinet have encouraged the spread of polio as a way to degrade the population and bring about what Netanyahu told the Congress he wanted: total victory. Am I overreading this?
No. That's what they're saying, my God, and that's what they're doing. Polio has been detected in all kinds of sewage and all kinds of other stuff that has been the result of the bombing in Gaza. It's the first time this polio virus has appeared since it was eradicated two decades ago. Okay, and that virus could go back to Israel as well. Meanwhile, there's all kinds of respiratory infections. Half of the Gazan people have upper respiratory infections. There are signs of jaundice and hepatitis. They're looking for plague. Now, you mentioned this advisor to the Netanyahu government. He was a past national security advisor, okay? And he's a general. And what he said was, this helps. This is when we get rid of those Hamas, meaning Palestinian people, and then it saves casualties from the IDF, from our army. They won't have to face as many people. And so this is one way of doing it. In other words, make sure that they don't have any hospitals to go to, or when they hurt themselves, when they step on a nail, for God's sake, there's no antibiotic to prevent it from becoming gangrene or becoming lockjaw or whatever. So this is part of it. The other part, Judge, is that it's become very clear that there are no shipments of any volume going into Israel to prevent hunger. So you've got disease and you got famine, human-induced famine. The head of the Israeli army says right after October 7th that we're going to prevent water, we're going to prevent food, we're going to prevent fuel, prevent medicine from going in there. That, my friends, is genocide, and that's what's going on. So anybody has any doubt about what the Israelis are trying to do, they're trying to either kill or expel or do away in some way with all the Palestinians. And they've already got, according to the Lancet up there in Britain, about 200,000 dead because of these, not only because of the bombing, not only because they're trapped under these buildings, but because of disease now. and continuing hunger. And Biden can do all he wants and say, I've tried to do this, but there are no trucks going in worth mentioning with food, medicine supplies, or anything else that the Gazans need. And, that's genocide pure and simple. It's not only the arms we're providing to Israel, it's all these other things that we shut our eyes to and say, okay, Netanyahu, you're real popular here in Congress. You could do whatever you want.
Who attacked the Druze teenagers in the Golan Heights as they were playing soccer over the weekend?
I was very suspicious at first, Judge. I looked for a false flag attack. If the Israelis want to go against Hezbollah at big time, then they would need something like that. But the reportage that I've seen indicates that it was a Hezbollah missile that struck there. Now, the question is whether that was intentional. It looks very much as though it was not intentional. There are Israeli outposts on the two mountains. They're really big hills in the area. This one went astray. Why would Hezbollah want to target kids playing soccer? So my analysis is that it went astray. It was not intentional. And curiously enough, the Hezbollah people are saying pretty much that, and they're conferring with the Iranians because they need to do that in case the Israelis take retaliatory steps that could start a wider war. That's where Erdogan comes in as well. Now, the irony of this thing, the dissimilarity, 12 Druze kids. Well, first of all, this is not really properly internationally recognized as Israel. Okay, this is part of Syria under international law. I've been up there. The Golan commands a view down in Damascus, for God's sake. It almost seems Damascus. It's very high ground, very strategic territory. So President Trump said, okay, let's let that be part of Israel. Now, we recognize it's part of Israel. It's not part of Israel. Does that matter? Yeah, the Druze don't like the Israelis. But the Israelis are trying to use this in a way that could really redound to a wider war against Hezbollah. I don't know if they'll do that or not. There are lots of people in the Israeli army that says, this is taking on too much. And as I've said before, Netanyahu is going to say, look, didn't you see my speech before Congress? 53 times they got up and did you see that? And Biden and Sullivan, and look, give me a break. We'll get no problem. We just go after Hezbollah. If we get in trouble, as we likely will, the U.S. will have to come to our aid, being an election year and everything else. So look, don't worry about it. Let's do it. That's what Netanyahu wants to do. And what's lacking is any definitive U.S. statement, a definitive one, an official one that says, look, you go against Hezbollah unprovoked, and we will not support you. If the administration said that in very certain terms, then the Israeli army would have some sort of lever to use and say, well, look, Netanyahu, you say the U.S. is going to come to your aid if we get in trouble up there, which we likely will. But they say they're not. How do you square that circle there, Bibi? And he'll be in trouble because the Israeli army is a powerful independent force, even though nominally they're under the orders of the prime minister.
Here's the foreign minister of Lebanon talking earlier today about who is more likely than not to have caused the death of these teenage soccer players.
So we don't know who did it. I know Hezbollah is accused by Israel that they did it. Hezbollah refuses. My feeling is that why would Hezbollah do it to kill Arabs, to kill Syrians? And Hezbollah has been, always targeting military positions of Israel, not civilians. The number of civilians killed in Israel were less than 7, while in Lebanon over more than 100 killed by Israel in Lebanon. So I cannot understand why would Hezbollah do it. There's no logic in it.
Why would Hezbollah intentionally kill its own children?
That's the key. There's lots that can go wrong in war. And my best guess is that this was not the target, obviously, for what reason, and that it could have been an Israeli defense like a dome surface-to-air missile that missed or fell down, as often happens in this kind of war. The other thing is that, if Hezbollah wanted to advertise this shooting, and it did shoot other missiles at the same time, it would have bragged about it. It did not brag about it. It did not take responsibility.
Right.
So that's also
the same point that the foreign minister was making. Are you concerned about the employment of American intelligence in the creation of a false flag? For example, the CIA persuading the president that Iran has a nuclear weapon or some other untruth in order to provoke the U.S. to give a green light to Israel?
Yes, I am. And a recent example would be Tony Blinken telling the world that Iran is very close, maybe a week or two away from having enough enriched uranium for a nuclear weapon. Okay. Well, the reality is that since 2007, to its credit, the intelligence community has said there is no evidence that Iran is working on a nuclear weapon. And so when you confuse or you conflate highly enriched uranium with a nuclear weapon, you still need a weapon to put that highly enriched uranium in, right? And they've not been working on that as recently as March at the latest worldwide threat briefing by the Director of National Intelligence. That same estimate, going back to 2007, that Iran is not yet working on a nuclear weapon, obtained. Now, would my former friends there in the analysis part of the agency try to doctor the next estimate? I don't think so. There's so much on the record. But would the operative people, if Blinken said, "Hey, you operations guy, you operations guys in the CIA, see if you can make some event or make some finding of a desktop treasure trove of stuff showing that Iran is now working on a nuclear weapon." I have to add a caveat here. About a month ago, Iran, under great duress, some of its high generals said, "Look, we may have to revisit this. I mean, we know there's a religious edict against it, a fatwa, but the circumstances that we may have to revisit this business about not making a nuclear weapon." But that was just a one-off thing, and I see no evidence, and of course I wouldn't see the real evidence, no evidence yet rhetorically or in the open press that they've done that.
Let me ask you a couple questions about your former colleagues. Would the CIA have known what Netanyahu was going to say to Congress before he delivered the speech?
Oh, sure. He gave the text to the White House, and normally the White House would share that with the agency. The agency would have no real ability to comment on it, other than to say, "Oh, that's great." Contrary-wise, on a presidential speech, it used to be the practice that the CIA would be able to comment on things like claims of weapons of mass destruction, that kind of thing. But when Netanyahu speaks, no, the CIA, nobody has anything to say about it, and the State Department would be too timid to even change, probably to maybe.
Would Mossad have known of Joe Biden's withdrawal from the presidential race before he announced it? And would Mossad have known what he was going to say to to the American public last Wednesday night before he said it?
On the former, no. Joe Biden didn't tell anybody. Didn't even tell his campaign staff. He told them a minute before he went on, or before he allegedly.
Well, you once told me that Mossad knows what's going on inside the White House.
Yeah, but if nobody inside the White House knows what Joe Biden's going to do, then neither does Mossad. My point is simply that Joe Biden didn't tell anybody what he was going to do. He let his campaign staff keep saying he was going to hang in the race until a minute before he did that tweet, for God's sake, and say, no, I'm not going to run again. And so how could Mossad know that? So in this case, the Mossad didn't know it. The other question you had, what did Mossad say, or what did they know before? What was the other?
His speech to the American people. I'm trying to find out how deep into the White House Mossad surveillance goes. Would Netanyahu have known, or to whomever Mossad reports, what Biden was going to say to the American public from the Oval Office last Wednesday night before he said it?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that it matters very much on this kind of thing. You could piece together what he was going to say, whether they were given whether someone within the White House gave them a preliminary draft or not. I don't know, but it's possible, but I don't know if it really matters all that much.
A speed bump on the front. This is a child protected area. Slow down less than 30 kilometers.